I'm delighted to welcome you here as we celebrate our 25th anniversary. I'm going to be talking to you about the history of the Hallie Ford Museum of Art, but I'm going to begin my lecture tonight with some background on the history of Willamette University and the growth of art instruction at Willamette before I dive into the history of Willamette's art collection and the birth of the Hallie Ford Museum of Art. A lot of the information and stories that you'll hear tonight will be woven into a history of the Hallie Ford Museum of Art and a handbook or highlights from our permanent collection that I intend to write before I retire in 2.5 years and sail off into the sunset, hopefully to a beautiful Greek island in the Aegean with a bottle of ouzo. Willamette University was the first university in the West. It was originally called the Oregon Institute and founded as a mission school in 1842 by Methodist missionaries, obviously very stern Methodist missionaries, traveling west across the Oregon Trail to Oregon and the Willamette Valley. In 1859, its name was changed from the Oregon Institute to Willamette University, and it offered its first degrees. Classes were originally taught in missionary Jason Lee's house. This is Jason Lee right here. But by the mid-1860s, Waller Hall was built and would remain the official Willamette University campus for the rest of the 19th century. This was Willamette University in 1867. It included offices, classrooms, a library, I think a dining hall, the president's office, Cone Chapel, and a men's dormitory in the attic on the top floor. Women students were housed in neighboring boarding houses. The campus expanded slowly during the first half of the 20th century. The current art building was built in 1905 to house the medical school before it moved to Portland in 1913 to become the forerunner of OHSU. Eaton Hall was built in 1910 to house faculty offices and classrooms that had heretofore been housed in Waller Hall, including Willamette's law school. A dormitory, gymnasium, and athletic fields were added in the 1920s, and a Pietro Beluschi-designed library was built in the 1930s. Collins Hall, named after lumberman Everell S. Collins, was completed in 1940 to house the mathematics and natural sciences departments. By 1941, when this aerial photograph was taken, the North Campus pretty much resembled what it looks like today. You can see Waller Hall, and then to the left, you can see Collins Hall, in front of it, the art building on the corner of State and Winter Street, and then behind is Losane Hall. Where the quad is now, that was Sweatland Field, which is where Willamette's football team played in the 30s and 40s, and to the kind of the upper right-hand corner of the slide is the gymnasium, which is was the gymnasium, is now the theater. And finally, here's a photograph of the North Campus as it appeared from the Capitol Dome just a few years before I arrived in 1998. In addition to being the first university in the West, Willamette had the first medical school and law school in the Pacific Northwest, founded in 1867 and 1883 respectively. And it may have been one of the first universities in the Pacific Northwest and possibly on the West Coast to offer formal art instruction. The history of art instruction at Willamette dates back to the 1880s when Marie Craig was hired as the first art teacher. Now this is not Marie Craig, this is a portrait of a woman by Marie Craig. But she came west in 1888 to teach at Willamette University, where she stayed until 1908. She was born in Pennsylvania in 1866 and had studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art and the Philadelphia School of Art. Marie was the only art teacher at Willamette at the time and depended on her students' tuition for her salary. Among her notable students were Mamie Parvin Brown, Clyde Leon Keller, Myra Wiggins, right here, and Melville Wire. In 1905, she married one of her art students, Victor Legal, and within a few years she left Willamette, and apparently Victor Legal as well. After she left Willamette, she taught privately in Salem as Madame Legal for a number of years, took up poetry in the 1920s, published some of her poems in a publication called Pacific Trails in the early 1930s, and passed away in 1944. After a 27-year hiatus with no art classes, when no art classes were offered, Connie Fowler came to Willamette in 1935 to teach drawing, painting, and printmaking. And it was Fowler who is largely credited with rescuing the art department and establishing it in its present form. Connie was born in Minnesota in 1907 and raised in Washington, California, and Oregon. She attended Washington State University in Pullman, the University of Washington in Seattle, and the University of Oregon in Eugene, where she studied with the legendary art teacher Andrew Vincent. Connie was recognized locally and regionally for her landscapes and her seascapes, as well as her prints of scenes in and around Salem, which she created as part of her MFA thesis project at the University of Oregon in 1940. Connie taught here during the early 1940s, but left Willamette in 1947 over a salary dispute. She was the lowest paid faculty member at Willamette at the time after teaching here for 12 years, so she applied for and accepted a teaching position at Albion College in Michigan, where she taught for the next 19 years. However, Connie really loved Oregon, and every summer she'd come back. When she retired in 1966, she moved back permanently and settled at Seal Rock on the Oregon coast. The Pacific Northwest Artists Archives in the Marco Hatfield Library house Connie's papers, along with those of her successor, Carl Hall. Carl Hall was born in Washington, D.C. in 1920 and raised in Detroit, Michigan. He attended the Meinziger School of Art in Detroit in the late 1930s, where he studied with the Mexican-born muralist Carlos Lopez. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, Carl was beginning to develop a national reputation as a magic realist painter, a style or genre of painting where every minute detail is rendered in a highly realistic and almost surrealistic style. When World War II intervened, he enlisted in the infantry and was sent to boot camp at Camp Adair near Corvallis, and it was there that he fell in love with the Oregon landscape. His widow, Phyllis, recalled that when he stepped off the train and saw Oregon and the Willamette Valley, he called it Eden again. He made a promise to himself that if he survived World War II, he would return to Oregon and settle here permanently. Carl spent the next 18 months in the South Pacific, in the Philippines and on Okinawa, but he did survive World War II, returned to Oregon in 1945, and settled in the South Salem Hills on Pajon Road in 1946 with his wife, Phyllis. When Connie Fowler abruptly left Willamette in 1947, Carl was hired to replace her in 1948. And he taught drawing, painting, and printmaking here until his retirement in 1986, first as an artist in residence, but eventually attained full faculty status. Carl was a popular teacher and a prolific painter who continued to paint the Oregon landscape throughout his long career. The slough or log pond from 1947, shown here, is a classic example of his style at the time he was hired. In 1949, Carl was joined by art historian and ceramic artist Cameron Paulin, and in the early to mid-1970s, they were joined by art historian Roger Hull, sculptor Robert Hess, and eventually in 1976, ceramic artist Marianne Johns. The department would remain unchanged for the next decade. The growth of Willamette's art collection dates back even further than the history of the art department. Among the earliest objects to enter Willamette's collection was a Clatsop wallet basket given to Reverend J.L. Parrish, one of the founders of the university, in the 1840s. The basket collection continued to grow in the 19th and early 20th century, but was significantly enriched when Veda Cross Bird, the daughter of local businessman Edwin C. Cross, gave her father's collection of approximately 300 baskets to Willamette in 1940. Cross had been an avid basket collector at the turn of the last century and left his substantial collection to his wife and children when he passed away in 1921. The collection was housed for years in the attic of Eaton Hall. Jim Bjornquist, who many of you may remember, an anthropology professor who taught an annual, or maybe it was a biannual course on Native American art and culture in the 1970s and 80s, would bring the baskets down from the attic for a month to 6 weeks every year or every other year so his anthropology students could study and write about them. Once his students were finished studying them, Jim would pack them back up in their boxes and return them to the attic where they lived most of the time. Ironically, one of the reasons our Native American baskets are in such good condition is because they were housed in a dry but not too dry environment, and they weren't exposed to sunlight for longer than 4 to 6 weeks at a time. When we opened in 1998 and installed them in the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Gallery, we had them listed as E.C. Bird Collection. Well, about 6 months after we opened, an elderly couple came in and said, "E.C. Bird? There ain't no such critter." Turned out that they were somehow related to Veda Cross Bird, who had donated the baskets in 1940, and it was assumed erroneously by whoever recorded the gift that her father's name was Edwin C. Bird, not Edwin C. Cross. We corrected our database, and they are now properly attributed. The first examples of Western European art to enter Willamette's collection can be traced to the late 1940s and early 1950s, when Reverend G. Bromley Oxnam and his wife, Ruth Fisher Oxnam, donated 5 examples of mid-19th century French landscape painting, including Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot's A Balmy Afternoon, to the university. G. Herbert Smith, the president of Willamette from 1942 until his retirement in 1969, had worked for Oxnam when the latter was president of DePauw University in the late 1920s and early 30s. When the Oxnams began downsizing their art collection of European and Asian art in the late 1940s, they decided to donate the 5 French landscape paintings to Willamette in honor of Reverend Oxnam's former colleague and protege. Camille Corot's A Balmy Afternoon has a particularly interesting history or provenance. It was originally owned by the Baroness Lucie de Caula, a German spy, who was sent to Paris by the Kaiser in the 1870s after the Franco-Prussian War in order to spy on the French. The Baroness had met the French General Ernest de Cissy in Germany. They'd become friends and lovers, and they resumed their relationship after the Franco-Prussian War when she moved to Paris. General de Cissy was charged with rebuilding the French army, and apparently, during their daily liaisons, he shared top-secret information with her, which she in turn shared with the Kaiser. The Baroness was a lover of music and the arts and is said to have been blessed with a beautiful voice as well as other skills. And she purchased A Balmy Afternoon directly from the artist, Camille Corot, in 1875. Well, the Baroness left Paris in the late 1870s after it was discovered that she was a spy. She died in poverty and really in almost obscurity in Germany sometime in the early 1890s. The Walker Foundation, the forerunner of the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, purchased A Balmy Afternoon sometime before 1912 because it showed up in their inventory at that time. During the Depression, the Walker needed money to continue its operations, had a number of Corots in their inventory, and decided to consign A Balmy Afternoon to an art gallery in New York City. And it was there in 1934 that it was purchased by the Oxnams. In 1948, Ruth Fisher Oxnam was given an honorary doctorate from Willamette. And in gratitude, the Oxnams gifted their Corot to the Salem School, along with several other French Barbizon paintings over the next few years. Throughout the 1960s and 70s and 80s, artworks from various alumni and donors trickled into Willamette's collection. Maribeth Collins, who would emerge in the early 2000s as the Hallie Ford Museum of Art's major patron and benefactor, and my second mother, played a pivotal role in the development of the permanent collection because of a conversation she heard in a restaurant one day. As Maribeth recounted to me years later, she was sitting in a restaurant having lunch one day when she overheard 2 artists sitting nearby complaining that colleges and universities never seemed to have enough money to buy artwork. As a longtime board member at Willamette and as a woman with a compassionate and generous heart, Maribeth realized that she could help artists by donating funds annually to Willamette to purchase artworks by living Pacific Northwest artists for its permanent collection. Maribeth started making annual financial contributions that would eventually be transformed into the Maribeth Collins Art Acquisition Fund, our endowment fund for art acquisitions. But during the 1980s and 90s, she helped acquire a number of key works by Pacific Northwest artists, including Lucinda Parker's Saraband, Faye Jones's The Conductor, and Jacob Lawrence's The Library, among many others. A turning point in the history of Willamette's art collection occurred in 1989 when Mark and Janice Sponenberg offered the university their personal collection of approximately 250 examples of European, Asian, and American art. Mark Sponenberg was a sculptor, an art historian, and an amateur Egyptologist, a monuments officer during World War II, a worldwide traveler, director or principal of the National College of Arts in Lahore, Pakistan, and a longtime professor of sculpture and the history of art at the University of Oregon and Oregon State University. Mark was born in Cadillac, Michigan in 1918 and educated at the University of Michigan, Cranbrook Academy, and Wayne State University in Detroit, where he studied sculpture and the history of art. He enlisted in the Army at the outbreak of World War II, landed on the beaches at Normandy in 1944, and fought in the Battle of the Bulge in Northern Europe in 1944 and 45. When it was discovered that he had a background in the visual arts, he was transferred to the Division of Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives, and he was part of the group of monuments officers who discovered a large cache of stolen artwork in the Alt-Aussee salt mine in Western Austria, made famous in the Robert Edsel book and George Clooney film. Among the 5,000 art treasures they discovered hidden by the Nazis in the salt mine were the famous bust of Nefertiti and the Ghent altarpiece, as well as works by Michelangelo, Dürer, Rubens, and Vermeer. And it was Mark who led the first convoy of stolen artworks across the Alps to the Munich collecting point in Germany, where they were inventoried and stored until they could be repatriated to their rightful owners. After World War II ended, Mark stayed on in Europe to study sculpture at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. In 1946, he met and married Huguette Ozanone, a French artist, and together they returned to the United States that fall when Mark accepted a teaching position at the University of Oregon. In 1951, Mark became the first recipient of an American Research Center in Egypt grant to travel to Egypt, where he spent the next 2 years writing about Egyptian sculpture and visiting the temples and tombs along the Nile. In 1956, Mark was teaching at the Royal College of Art in London when he was approached by representatives of the Pakistani government to see if he would be interested in becoming the first director or principal of the National College of Art in Lahore. He enthusiastically agreed, resigned his position at the University of Oregon in 1957. He was replaced by Jan Zak, a Czech-born sculptor living in Victoria, BC, who we featured in a retrospective exhibition at the Hallie Ford Museum of Art in 2003, and he and Huguette moved to Pakistan. He was there for 4 years, but left in 1961 when Huguette was diagnosed with inoperable cancer, and she wanted to return to her beloved Paris to die. Huguette passed away within a month of their return to Paris, and the following year, back in the United States, Mark was offered a teaching position at Oregon State University in Corvallis by his friend and former fellow monuments officer Gordon Gilkey, who was chair of the art department and a professor of printmaking at that time. Mark eventually remarried Janeth Hoag Russell Sponenberg of Corvallis and spent the next 2 decades teaching sculpture and the history of art at the Corvallis School. And throughout his long career and from his many travels, Mark amassed a sizable collection of artworks that he used for teaching purposes in his classroom, including examples of Middle Eastern art, an Egyptian mummy mask, European art, Asian art, American art, and Pacific Northwest art. During this time, Mark had maintained a cordial and collegial relationship with a young art historian in nearby Salem named Roger Hull. Roger had been born in Lebanon, Tennessee in 1943 and raised in Wallace, Idaho, where his father was attorney and coincidentally my uncle's roommate in law school at the University of Washington. Roger attended Whitman College in Walla Walla, where he received his BA degree in English and went on to earn his MA and PhD degrees in art history at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, specializing in the history of photography. In 1970, Roger accepted a teaching position at Willamette University, and during the 1970s and 80s, Roger and Mark would correspond with each other from time to time and would see each other at occasional meetings and conferences. In 1989, Mark and his wife Janeth invited Roger and his wife Bonnie to their home at Seal Rock on the Oregon coast for lunch, and during the course of their conversation, offered their art collection to Willamette. In making their offer, Mark told Roger that Willamette reminded him of the small liberal arts colleges in New England that he so greatly admired, and that if he and Janeth gave their collection to the Salem School, they felt it would not be tucked away in a basement somewhere, but rather would be used for teaching purposes, just as he had used it in his art history classes for 35 years. Roger was initially flattered, but questioned whether Willamette had the staff, resources, or bandwidth to care for the collection. Undeterred, Mark suggested that Roger take Edward Steichen's Mary Learns to Walk as a short-term loan so he might use it for teaching purposes. Gradually, Roger saw the potential of accepting the collection for pedagogical and research purposes, and in 1990, the collection was accepted by Willamette and transferred to campus. The Sponenberg gift in 1990 was really the catalyst for the creation of the Hallie Ford Museum of Art. In the winter of 1991, the Sponenberg collection was shown for the first time in the Hallie Brown Ford Gallery on the top floor of the art building. Germaine Fuller, who taught Asian art history on campus and served as chair of the art department at the time, oversaw the design and installation of that first exhibition. During the summer of 1993, one of Roger's students, Mary Patton, spent a week on the East Coast where she visited Harvard University, Smith College, Williams College, Cornell University, and Vassar College as part of a research paper she was writing on the physical requirements to be met in the design of a museum of art and ethnology. In the fall of that year, Willamette's president, Jerry Hudson, who many of us remember, issued a memo to faculty asking them to submit ideas for new initiatives for the Board of Trustees to consider. On November 30th, his 50th birthday, Roger rose early and submitted a one-paragraph proposal to Willamette's Long-Range Planning Committee to create a museum of art on campus. Hudson and the committee were apparently intrigued by the idea. That winter, he asked Roger to attend the Board of Trustees meeting at Salishan on the Oregon coast to make a presentation. So Roger and Bonnie loaded up their station wagon with bits and pieces from the collection, drove to the coast, set up a pop-up exhibition at Salishan, and Roger gave a little talk. Apparently, the Board of Trustees liked Roger's presentation, but that's about as far as it went. They didn't have the $10 to $15 million that would have been needed to build a new museum of art on campus. Nevertheless, during the summer of 1994, Roger received a Hewlett grant to catalog the Willamette Art Collection with 4 students and Linda Nelson, the art department's secretary. In the fall of 1995, he and Bonnie spent part of his sabbatical visiting many of the colleges and universities that Mary had visited 2 years earlier. Still, once they returned, neither a building nor the necessary funds were available for creating a museum of art on campus. But that was about to change. In 1996, the U.S. West Communication Building, located on the corner of State and Cottage Streets, 1 block from campus and 2 blocks from downtown, became available. Designed by Salem architect James Payne in 1965 as an office building for Pacific Northwest Bell, the forerunner of U.S. West Communications, the 2-story structure featured 27,000 feet of floor space and glass, metal, and marble facades designed in the international style. U.S. West Communications knew that Willamette planned to expand its campus west and gave the school the right of first refusal. But at $1,050,000 for the building and property, the price tag was just too steep. Undaunted, Barbara Mahoney, Vice President for University Relations at that time, approached Board of Trustees member and longtime benefactor Hallie Ford, who she knew had a keen interest in the visual arts. Through her foundation, Hallie provided a $1.85 million gift, $1,050,000 to purchase the building and property, and $800,000 to begin the interior improvements. In making her donation, Hallie didn't ask that the Museum of Art be named after her, but she did ask if the permanent gallery earmarked to house the Pacific Northwest Art Collection could be named after Carl Hall, who Hallie had taken painting lessons from at the YWCA in Salem in the early 1970s. And as I like to say, when you give $2 million, you can name just about anything you want. But honestly, it made perfect sense to name a gallery devoted to Pacific Northwest art after one of Oregon and the Pacific Northwest's foremost landscape painters. Once Hallie made her initial gift, other donors would soon follow, including Maribeth Collins, Melvin Henderson Rubio, Bruce and David Roberts, and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, among others. And after it was announced in 1996 that the university intended to renovate the old Pacific Northwest Bell building on the corner of State and Cottage Streets in downtown Salem into a state-of-the-art museum of art, a number of collectors, artists, and others stepped up to the plate to make donations of artwork to the permanent collection. Among the early donors were Bennett Ludden. Bennett was a musician. He and Connie Fowler were good friends. They were colleagues at Willamette in the 1940s. They both left about the same time. But many of the Connie Fowlers that we have in our permanent collection were gifts of Bennett. Leo Michelson from Portland, Portland collector who moved to Portland in the 1980s and became an early donor. Bill Rhodes from Eastern Oregon, from Madras, Oregon, a former reporter, a person who's passionate about Pacific Northwest art and photography, and probably, surprisingly, one of our largest individual donors. I think over the years, Bill has donated close to 700 objects to the collection. And Nancy and Dan Schneider. Dan is a Willamette from Salem. He went to St. Olaf College as an undergraduate, met Nancy, they got married, he came back to law school here, and has been practicing law in Chicago for many, many years. Major collections of both regional art as well as European and American works on paper. And Maribeth Collins, always the generous benefactor, provided funds to Willamette to acquire two important collections at that time: the Lily Lahau collection of Pacific Northwest art and a major collection of paintings, prints, and drawings by Willamette art faculty member Carl Hall. In late 1986, Willamette hired Soderstrom Architects of Portland to begin to transform the former office building into a state-of-the-art museum of art. And here are a range of photographs showing the building as it went through its metamorphosis. John Wiener of Soderstrom, the principal architect and designer, worked closely with the planning committee chaired by Roger and assisted by Cynthia Adams, an art historian and assistant to President Jerry Hudson, Rebecca Dobkins, a newly hired assistant professor of anthropology who had worked at the Smithsonian's Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., and had curated a traveling exhibition of Maidu artist Frank Day, and Todd Massa, director of institutional research and planning support at Willamette, who held an MA degree in museology. Presentation Design Group of Eugene, Oregon was brought in as collection and exhibition design consultants, and students were put to work conducting research on the objects in the collection. As the building went through a physical transformation in 1997 and 1998, Roger assembled and chaired the search committee that hired me as the founding director in late February of 1998. On October 3rd of that year, the Hallie Ford Museum of Art opened its doors for the first time. So what have our major accomplishments been over the past 25 years? Well, during the past 25 years, our permanent collection has grown from approximately 3,000 objects in 1998 to over 12,500 objects in 2023. We've added superb examples of ancient art, Renaissance and Baroque drawings, Asian art, Pacific Northwest art, Native American art, African art, Oceanic art, and contemporary crafts. In fact, with the addition of the Museum of Contemporary Craft collection in 2021, we have what is arguably one of the finest collections of contemporary crafts on the West Coast and one of the best collections of American ceramics in the United States. Similarly, with the addition of the George and Colleen Hoyt collection last year, we have one of the finest collections of contemporary Northwest Coast indigenous art in the United States. In 2006, 2007, 2008, we went through a major renovation of our basement to transform it into a state-of-the-art support space for collections and exhibitions. And in 2017, 2018, we went through a 2-year process of updating our collection database so that almost the entire permanent collection is now available and easily researchable online for scholars, faculty, students, and others who wish to learn more about the objects in our collection. We've continued to be responsible stewards of the permanent collection, providing ongoing conservation treatment to objects in need of repair with the support of the Francis Price Cook Art Conservation Fund, set up by the niece of the great mid-20th century Oregon modernist C.S. Price to ensure that objects in our permanent collection are properly cared for. This is Tom Fuller, a contract objects conservator that we work with hosting a demonstration in our lobby of his restoration work on a Native American basket. Over the past 25 years, we've mounted a stunning array of world-class exhibitions intended to inform, instruct, and inspire. In keeping with our mission to support the liberal arts curriculum of the university, we've organized a number of major art historical exhibitions over the years that in many cases have supported courses and departments at Willamette. These have included exhibitions of Greek and Roman art, Egyptian art, Maori weaving, Chinese bronzes, Vietnam War photography, Renaissance drawings, ancient Near Eastern art, contemporary American folk art, themes of social justice in contemporary printmaking and photography, and one of my favorites, Prince of Egypt and the Holy Land by the 19th century Scottish artist and traveler David Roberts, among many others. Our ability to mount these types of art historical exhibitions, as well as the regional exhibitions that have become our mainstay over the past 25 years, are really an outgrowth of a number of donors, collectors, and others stepping up and asking me how they could help. About 6 weeks after I arrived in Salem in 1998, David Roberts called me and asked me for an appointment. He and his father Bruce had underwritten the cost of the lecture hall, which they named in honor of Roger Hull. And during the course of our conversation, he told me that they wanted to extend their financial commitment. He said that they were very interested in underwriting an exhibition, and did I have any ideas? Well, I knew Willamette was requiring its freshmen to take a one-semester course called Worldviews. And the focus of Worldviews for the next 4 years was on 5th century Athens. And I knew the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston had a major collection of classical art because I had borrowed from them in the past. So I called my friend John Herman, curator of classical art in Boston at the time, explained our situation, and asked him if he might consider a loan exhibition that we could borrow from their collection. He said an exhibition of classical art had just returned from the MFA's satellite gallery space in Nagoya, Japan, and was sitting in crates in their basement. And if I could raise the money to bring it to Oregon, I could have the exhibition. I told John I can raise the money. We presented the exhibition in the fall of 2000 to the amazement of many of our colleagues around the country because we had such a small staff at the time and had only been open for less than 2 years. I mean, how do you bring a major loan exhibition from the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston to Salem, Oregon, after only opening 2 years earlier with 4 staff at the time, I think? Well, sometime that fall, Hallie had an opportunity to see the exhibition and was clearly impressed. She invited me to her home for coffee and asked me about the cost of temporary exhibitions. And this was, the exhibition opened in September. This was probably in October or November that she invited me to her home for coffee. I told her that temporary exhibitions can range from $500 to $25,000 depending on the nature and scope of the exhibition. And she asked me point blank, as only Hallie could do, well, what could you do with $100,000? Well, at that time, I'd been in the field for 24 years, and no one had ever said to me, John, what can you do with $100,000? But I told her I've got ideas. I'll get back to you. My best friend was Jim Romano, curator of Egyptian art at the Brooklyn Museum. And Jimmy and I had talked for years about collaborating on an Egyptian art exhibition together. I called him on the telephone and pitched the idea of a small but choice survey exhibition of masterpieces of Egyptian art from American collections to him. And after I finished my spiel, he paused for a moment and said, "Count me in, brother." Over the next 2 years, Jim and I organized the exhibition, secured the loans, mounted and installed the exhibition, organized a major lecture series, and published the accompanying book, which is still available for sale in our museum store. The exhibition got me to thinking about what distinguished the Hallie Ford Museum of Art from other university art galleries and museums in our first 4 years of existence. And it suddenly dawned on me that it was our ability to organize and mount 2 really important art historical exhibitions and bring them to Salem. If we had an endowment fund to support these types of projects, I speculated, we could really distinguish ourselves from just about every small university museum of art west of the Hudson River, and who better to fund an initiative like that than Hallie Ford? I approached Hallie with the idea on numerous occasions over the next 2 years, but Hallie was tough. She was a hard sell. She did not suffer fools lightly. And whenever I would bring it up, usually over lunch at Dairy Queen in Monmouth, that was her favorite restaurant, she would deflect the conversation to another topic. Well, in the summer of 2004, I received a Hewlett Foundation grant to spend 6 weeks on the West Coast with my wife and children looking at small college museums of art in New England and the Midwest, similar to what Roger and Bonnie had done a decade earlier. When I returned to Salem that fall, I decided to share my trip with Hallie, who knew I loved to travel and would be anxious to hear about my trip. I wasn't able to see her until December, so I bought a Christmas card and a poinsettia, and with my son Aaron in tow, who was down from the University of Washington to visit Pam and me at the time, we drove out to Monmouth to visit Hallie at Heron Point Retirement Home. We spent about 45 minutes together. I told her about my trip. She asked a lot of questions. I gave her the Christmas card and the poinsettia. She thanked me. I gave her a big hug and a kiss, and I wished her a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. As I was walking out the door, she said to me, "John, do you remember that Blockbuster exhibition endowment fund that you wanted me to fund?" "Of course I do, Hallie," I replied. "Well," she said, "it's yours." I couldn't believe it. I thanked her profusely, gave her another big hug and kiss. As I was walking down the hall at Heron Point, actually walking on air down the hall at Heron Point, my son Aaron looked at me and said, "Boy, Dad, that was so worth the price of a poinsettia." But seriously, Hallie's gift was transformational because over time it provided the Hallie Ford Museum of Art with funds to mount some truly extraordinary exhibitions, like Timeless Renaissance, Italian drawings from the Alessandro Maggiore collection, which my friend and colleague Ricardo de Mambro Santos organized, an exhibition of Renaissance and Baroque drawings from a very important but largely forgotten Italian collection. Breath of Heaven, Breath of Earth, Ancient Near Eastern Art from American Collections, was a major loan exhibition of Sumerian, Babylonian, Assyrian, Hittite, Levantine, and Persian art that my friend and colleague Trudy Kwame and I co-curated in honor of my friend Jim Romano, who was killed tragically a year after we had organized the Egyptian exhibition together. Strange and Wonderful American Folk Art from the Willem and Diane Volker's collection, an exhibition of self-taught artists from one of the great private collections of folk art in the country. And of course, David Roberts, Artist and Traveler, an exhibition of prints of Egypt and the Holy Land by this important 19th century Scottish artist and traveler, among many others. Similarly, in keeping with our emphasis on the art and artists of our region, and I must emphasize that we really are a museum about place. We have presented a wide variety of solo and group exhibitions for some of the foremost artists of our region, including Carl Hall, Faye Jones, Manuel Izquierdo, Alfredo Areguin, Ross Palmer Beecher, Holly Andres, M.K. Guth, Dale Chihuly, April Waters, and R.V. Smith, as well as Native American artist Rick Bartow, Joe Federson, James Lavador, and Marie Watt, among countless others. As with our art historical exhibitions, many of these regional exhibitions have been supported over the years with funds from the Maribeth Collins Art Exhibition Fund, intended to support the organization and implementation of historical and contemporary regional art exhibitions, like Carl Hall and Dale Chihuly, and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Endowment Fund, intended to support the organization and implementation of historical and contemporary Native American exhibitions like Rick Bartow, Marie Watt, and last year's stunning Transformations, Northwest Coast art from the George and Colleen Hoyt collection. What I think is particularly significant is the fact that the Hallie Ford Museum of Art has published 36 major books and monographs during the past 22 years, making it one of the most active publishers in Oregon and indeed probably in the entire Pacific Northwest. I know of no other university museum that has published as many books as we have over the past 2 decades. Over the years, our titles have been distributed by the University of Washington Press, and more recently, the Oregon State University Press, making sure that our scholarly art books and artist monographs receive worldwide exposure and readership. Over the past 25 years, we brought some of the foremost scholars, writers, artists, and thinkers to Salem to lecture. These have included Brian Fagan, author and editor of 46 books on the history of archaeology, John James Audubon scholar and writer Bill Suter, Asian American painter and printmaker Roger Shimomura, a folk art specialist Joe Farb Hernandez, Native American artist and activist Wendy Redstar, my friend Robert Edsel, New York Times bestselling author and founder of the Monuments Men Foundation for the Preservation for Arts, among many others. In addition to 6 to 8 free lectures per year, we've organized free film series, free panel discussions, free dance performances. I'll never forget this dance. This is the Rainbow Creek Dancers, hideout artist Robert Davidson's dance troupe. And we brought them down in 2014 in conjunction with an exhibition called Contemporary Bestiary, Animals in Contemporary Art. And we brought Robert and his dance troupe down from Haida Gwaii and had the performance in the Rogers in Hudson Hall. And it was great to see, for those of you who know him, George Hoyt up there dancing with all of us and Robert's dance troupe. It was great. One of those great moments. Artist demonstrations, free family activity days. And all of these activities have really enhanced the quality of life in Salem and have helped make really Salem and the Mid-Willamette Valley a great place to live, work, come to school, and stay. Finally, in 2005, we established a docent program or volunteer guide program that currently boasts 12 active docents who provide tours of our collections and exhibitions to more than 2,500 K through 12 students, homeschoolers, college students, adults, seniors, and other groups each year. During the past 25 years, we undertook a complete renovation of our basement from 2006 to 2008. It doesn't look this neat anymore. Made possible by $1 million gift from Maribeth Collins. We added uplighting to the facades of our building to illuminate it at night in 2010. This idea, the idea of adding uplighting to our building, was really my wife Pam's idea, and I thought it was a brilliant idea. And either the entire gallery or portions of the gallery, in order to keep the galleries fresh and different and changing. It's one of the ways we utilize our footprint. Because we have a limited footprint, our galleries are small, and so the best way to kind of get the collection out there is to try to rotate those galleries fairly frequently. In 2013, we installed LED lighting throughout our building. In 2016, we made our bathrooms on both floors completely handicapped accessible and undertook a number of other projects. And although I don't have a picture to show you, thanks to the generous gift from the estate of late Maribeth Collins, we were able to renovate a nearby building into a state-of-the-art storage space this past year for the Museum of Contemporary Craft Collection, which is currently being stored in Portland, but will be brought down to Salem in the spring once our compact storage shelves are installed in the building. Over the past quarter century, our staff has grown from 2 full-time and 2 part-time staff back in the late 1990s and early 2000s to a full and part-time staff of 8. A director, a curator of collections and exhibitions, a curator of education, a membership and public relations manager, an assistant to the director, a registrar, and 2 front desk receptionists. In addition, we work with a contract exhibit designer preparator who designs and installs our permanent and temporary exhibitions, and several contract graphic designers who design our banners, exhibition graphics, and books. And Willamette provides a security officer, a custodian, HR, and accounting support. Endowment. Well, from our inception in 1998, we built an $8 million endowment fund with specific endowment funds earmarked to support art acquisitions, various types of exhibitions, staff salaries, art conservation, and general operating support. We have, for example, the Maribeth Collins Art Acquisition Fund, the George and Colleen Hoyt Native American Weaving Arts Acquisition Fund, and the Amanda Snyder Art Acquisition Fund to help support art acquisitions. In addition, we've got restricted non-endowment funds set up by Jody Everts, Gary and Pat Leiser, Stephen Soyle, and others to support the acquisition of specific types of art, from Islamic coins to contemporary kinetic sculpture. We have the Hallie Ford Exhibition Fund, the Maribeth Collins Art Exhibition Fund, and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Endowment Fund to support art historical, regional, and Native American art exhibitions, programs, and publications, respectively. And Maribeth Collins, our major benefactor and patron for over 20 years, endowed 3 of our 4 key professional positions at the Hallie Ford Museum of Art during her lifetime. My position, the Maribeth Collins Director, bears her name. Jonathan Bucci's position, the John Olbrantz Curator of Collections and Exhibitions, named by Maribeth's children in honor of Maribeth and my friendship. And Elizabeth Garrison's position, the Cameron Paulin Curator of Education, named after longtime art history professor Cameron Paulin, who Maribeth was quite fond of. As I mentioned earlier, we have the Francis Price Cook Art Conservation Fund that helps support ongoing conservation work on objects in the permanent collection, and we have a general operating support endowment fund, seeded with a $500 gift from Hallie Ford right before we opened, and currently close to $1 million that supports other staff salaries as well as lights, electricity, telephone, and other non-glamorous but critically important aspects of our operation. And finally, the late Cindy Day, who many of you may remember as an antique dealer here in Salem, recently left the Hallie Ford Museum of Art a $2 million gift from her estate. Because she didn't designate where she would like the funds earmarked, her gift went into what we call our quasi-endowment fund, where the interest on principal will be used for general operating support. During the past decade, we've experienced a significant growth in membership, from our original membership of about 250 members in 1998 to a high of 750 members just before the coronavirus pandemic hit in 2020, when membership tanked and dropped back down to a low of 343 members. However, since our facility reopened in the fall of 2020 and exhibitions and programs have gotten back to normal, we've seen our membership numbers slowly rise. We hope to reach 500 members by the end of the year and back up to 750 over the next few years. As an aside, if any of you here are currently not members, I would encourage you to join. Andrea Faust, who's up there, our membership and public relations manager, is here tonight and can answer any questions about membership that you have after my lecture. Similarly, we've seen our attendance rise from 10,000 visitors per year when we first opened in 1998 to a high of 20,000 to 24,000 visitors per year in the years just leading up to our 20th anniversary in 2018, only to plummet back down to about 10,000 visitors per year in 2020 because of COVID. However, as with membership, attendance numbers have shot back up to approximately 20,000 visitors per year over the past 2 years, driven in large part by 3 extremely popular exhibitions: Dale Chihuly, Cylinders, Macchia, and Venetians in 2021, David Roberts, Artist and Traveler, and Transformations, Northwest Coast Art from the George and Colleen Hoyt Collection in 2022, as well as an effective marketing strategy that saw a 29% increase in out-of-town visitors from 2021 to 2022. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the phenomenal growth in store sales over the past couple of years, thanks in large part to our talented store manager, who's brought in an interesting and dynamic range of art books and art-related merchandise at reasonable and affordable prices. From 2021 to 2022, for example, store sales have risen 41% over the past year due to effective merchandising and marketing, turning the Hallie Ford Museum of Art museum store into the profit center that we always knew it would become. While the Hallie Ford Museum of Art has accomplished a great deal over the past 25 years, we still have a number of significant challenges that lie ahead. In order to meet those challenges, we've hired consultant Gail Anderson of Santa Fe, New Mexico, to work with the Hallie Ford Museum of Art and the Pacific Northwest College of Art specifically the Center for Contemporary Art and Culture at PNCA, to help forge a strategic plan. I'll be retiring in a couple of years, and I wanted to leave my successor with a solid, realistic, and sustainable roadmap moving forward. The strategic planning process began last summer when Carol Long, Provost of Willamette University, Jen Cole, the Dean of PNCA, and I gathered background information for Gail on each of our operations. In my case, I sent her a copy of our mission statement, collection documents, exhibition and program information, attendance figures, promotion and marketing plans, fundraising histories, and the like. Over the past 2 months, Gail has conducted extensive interviews with both internal and external stakeholders, Hallie Ford Museum of Art PNCA staff, community leaders, Willamette University PNCA faculty, regional art leaders, Willamette University administrators, and local and regional artists and curators to gather their impressions of the Hallie Ford Museum of Art and the Center for Contemporary Art and Culture. The purpose of these interviews was to reveal our strengths, our weaknesses, and hopes and prospects for the future, as well as how we might partner and work together moving forward. Next week, Gail and a small group of internal stakeholders, including myself, will meet over 3 days to discuss these issues. And in January and February of next year, a larger group of stakeholders will get together in work sessions to discuss institutional priorities. These work sessions will be followed by an internal assessment to determine which current activities align with the strategic plan, which do not, and what new initiatives should be added. Among the critical issues we need to address include vision, mission, and values. What is the vision of the Hallie Ford Museum of Art? Vision is sort of an aspirational statement. My vision for the Hallie Ford Museum of Art has always been, I want it to be one of the best small college museums of art in the country. Is that realistic? I don't know. I think we are. Mission statement. Is our mission still relevant to who we are? And values. I don't think our values are going to change a lot. We emphasize quality. We emphasize scholarship. Those are important values that I think need to carry on moving forward. We have other issues that we need to address. Collections, exhibitions, and programs. We have a collection that's grown from 3,000 objects to 12,500 objects. We made some strides forward by renovating the nearby building into storage space for the Museum of Contemporary Craft Collection, but that's only kind of a stopgap measure because once that's loaded with the Museum of Contemporary Craft Collection, then and we move some pieces from our basement over, that only means we now have space in the basement to house the Hoyt collection, and at the end of the day, both spaces are full. So, how do we continue to accommodate this growing collection? Historically we've collected kind of across the art historical spectrum. We've collected European, Asian, American art. We have a pre-Columbian, small pre-Columbian collection. We have African, Oceanic. We need to really think about what we collect, and maybe we begin to narrow it down somewhat. We need to look at our exhibitions. I'm a very ambitious director, but it may be that moving forward, we can't be as ambitious as we have been in the past. We maybe need to look at more maybe collection-based exhibitions, and we certainly have a lot of material to draw from. Maybe traveling exhibitions. We're not sure. And programs. We do a good job, I think, of reaching out to you all, but there are other communities in Salem that I think we need to reach out to as an institution. And we have, 27% of Marion County's population are Hispanic. We need to figure out how to reach out to those communities and make them feel as if, Willamette is and the Hallie Ford Museum of Art is their museum as well. We've done a great job in terms of reaching out to the Salem community and to the arts community in the region, certainly to the Native American community. We are their museum, and we are the regional artists museum. But there are other communities. There's the neurodivergent community, which we're beginning to reach out to. So there are traditional and non-traditional audiences that we want to reach with our programs. audience engagement, finance, and resource development. I mean, obviously, we want to see our attendance continuing to grow through, effective marketing and interesting exhibitions that draw people in. Finances and resource development. I would personally like to add to our $10 million endowment another $1 or $2 million before I leave. We have some promised estate gifts that will certainly add to that, but we still have naming opportunities if anybody's interested. The Study Gallery and the Prince Study Center are still available. And finally, governance, facilities, and staffing. By governance, we've kind of gone back and forth about adding a board of visitors. It's basically a group of advisors to meet with me and the staff, or whoever follows me and the staff, once a year for a couple of days, just to kind of brainstorm different ideas and use their expertise and knowledge to help begin to implement those ideas. How do we expand our endowment? How do we expand our membership? How do we, I could envision them coming together, once or twice a year to crash on a particular problem and to come up with some recommendations and strategies for moving that forward. Facilities are a big issue for us. We need additional storage space. We need additional gallery space. We have a world-class collection of contemporary crafts. We have a world-class collection of contemporary Northwest Coast indigenous art. We have world-class collection. We have arguably the finest collection of African stone sculpture in the United States, a gift from the late Keith Acapole. We have a marvelous study collection of art from Papua New Guinea, and we have no place to display them. So, longer term, we need to think about gallery space. We need to think about storage space. We need to think about a classroom space for workshops and classes that we might want to offer through the museum. And whether that's within our building or outside our building, I don't know. But eventually those issues will need to be addressed. And finally, staffing. I've always believed that staffing is critical, and we have a very, very small staff. We have 4 full-time people and 4 part-time people. I was talking to my friend John Weber, who's director of the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art at the University of Oregon. And John, we were chatting a few weeks ago, and he was just saying how much he was impressed with our collections and our exhibitions and the range of programs and publications we do. And he said, what's your staff size? And I said, we've got 4 full-time and 4 part-time. He said, no shit. He said, I've got 30. I've got 30 full-time staff on my, 30 full-time people on my staff. So, over the next few years, and as part of the strategic planning process, we're going to need to really look at staffing, and staff drives everything. Staff drives collections, exhibitions, and programs. And without the staff to support that, you can't do that. So if the staff isn't there, then we have to scale back our goals for collections and exhibitions and programs accordingly. We've got to match goal with reality. So in any event, at the conclusion of the planning process next spring or summer, we intend to unveil a new strategic plan that will hopefully serve as a dynamic blueprint for the Hallie Ford Museum of Art moving forward. I look forward to sharing with you once it's unveiled. The Hallie Ford Museum of Art has achieved a great deal over the past 25 years, and we look forward to continuing to serve as an intellectual, cultural, and artistic resource for Willamette University, the City of Salem, the Mid-Willamette Valley, the state of Oregon, the region and beyond for many years to come. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have. Thank you. And I did it in an hour. Questions? Yes, Joe.
Do you ever sell any of your collections or parts of them?
No, we haven't, no. Normally museums don't sell, well, they deaccession collections.
That's the word.
Right.
Sorry.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and that's an issue that we're really going to be grappling with over the next year or two,
Okay.
because we do have, when we first opened, we collected, you come knocking at the door, got some pieces I'd like to give to you. No problem, bring them in. Like America at the beginning of the 20th century and the Statue of Liberty, all are welcome. I mean, that's the way we built the collection, quite frankly. We have 400 prints by a Portland printmaker named Jean Moment, who probably nobody ever remembers. We have multiples of the same print, but they were accepted at some point. So there, we really need to kind of go through and identify those pieces that we want to sell, and then we need to deaccession them and either auction them using the proceeds to continue to support the collection, or to basically transfer them to another institution that might be interested. Those are issues that we'll need to address within the next couple of years, because if you walk through our basement, it's jam full.
I was very impressed by your wonderful litany of endowment funds that cover different aspects of your program, which is so multivarious. But I didn't hear you say that you had a special fund for publications, and that was one of your distinctive assets, that you seemed to create more publications than the museums of comparable size.
Right. What we've done with our publications, it's been kind of all over the map. We the three major endowment funds that we do have, the Maribeth Collins, the Hallie Ford Exhibition Fund, the Maribeth Collins Art Exhibition Fund, and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Endowment Fund, provide funds not only for exhibitions but also publications. But oftentimes, the revenue that we have in those endowment funds isn't enough to support a publication. So what we've done with many of our Northwest publications is we have and we haven't done it for a while, but we do have a large database of people that are interested in Northwest art. And we, in the past, historically, would solicit them for funds to help with the publication. So if you look at some of our early publications, you'll see in the back of the book a list of donors anywhere from a $25 donor up to a $5,000 donor. And so that's helped supplement many of our publications. We've received grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, from the Ford Family Foundation in Roseburg, to help underwrite some of our publications. So it's been just kind of a mixed bag in terms of where those dollars came from. But at least for me as director, they've been important. They've been important. Exhibitions, come and go. As I told our dear friend Rita Robillard, who had a solo exhibition last year at the Hallie Ford Museum of Art, and Rita was concerned that one piece from the Portland Art Museum wasn't going to be in the exhibition. It was really an important piece, but they didn't approve the loan because they're not approving any loans during the construction that they're going through. But they did grant us permission to reproduce it, and it graces the cover of Rita's book. And I told Rita, I said, at the end of the day, exhibitions are great, but exhibitions come and go. But what lasts forever are those publications. Those are the documents. And so, at least for me, publications are really, really important. So, yes.
Well, could you put another story on if you have the money?
What we've looked at that, and there are different, we've heard different opinions on that. We've heard, and I haven't investigated that for a while. But when I first came here, they said, no, the building was constructed in 1965. It's not seismically stable enough to hold a third floor. I've talked to other people who said, yeah, we could add a third floor. So there's also the building next door, the old the Quest building, CenturyLink building. As I understand it, Willamette has been given right of first refusal because CenturyLink knows that Willamette is interested in, taking over the entire block. So, whether we go up, whether we go sideways, whether we tear the building down and build something new at some point, I don't know. But would love to have that additional space, but that'll be for somebody else to deal with. Oh.
Don, beyond your 4 permanent or 4 full-time and 4 part-time staff, can you talk about what additional support you get from Willamette University?
Oh, sure.
In terms of development or facilities?
We get their HR department handles all of our personnel. So if we have a vacancy, the position goes through HR. It's advertised through HR. They do a lot of the screening, so we don't need to have an HR person on staff. The accounting office, processes all of our bills, makes our payments, which is nice. So we don't have to have a business. We don't have to have a business manager on staff, which is nice. Willamette provides a campus safety officer. So we have a campus safety officer on duty when we're open. What else? Accounting, development. I've been really for the past 25 years. I've been the Hallie Ford Museum of Art's major gift officer. Okay, but we do work with Beth Walsh in the advancement office, and Beth works a lot with donors that are. I kind of work with a core group of donors that I've built up a relationship with over the years. But Beth is out there kind of prospecting for new donors, and so when she finds them, then she funnels them my way. So we work very collaboratively and cooperatively, with advancement. I think at this point that's pretty much it. Willamette's Office of Communications and Marketing has kind of gone through a transformation. We used to get a lot of our graphic design services handled through the Office of Communication, but now we contract that out and we pay for that. So a lot of the banners, the announcement cards that you all get as members, brushstrokes are designed by one of 3 different graphic designers that we work with, including Rick Yerk over here. Rick. Very good graphic designer. So it's it's a nice kind of symbiotic relationship that we have with the university. My goal in building the endowment over the years is, and it takes a long time to build endowment, but my goal, I'd love to see the Hallie Ford Museum of Art reach a point where it was totally self-sufficient, totally sustainable. And didn't need to rely on the university for, it would still be a part of Willamette University, would still be a department of the university, but would be completely self-sufficient and supporting itself through its endowment fund, through its admission fees, through its membership, through its grants and contributions, through its other earned income sources. That would be my goal. And that's been my goal from the get-go. It's just that we're not quite there yet, but it takes a long time. How long did it take the Harvard University Art Museums to build up their $400 million endowment fund? Long time. So, Jim.
Well, happily, my question was identical to my neighbor's down here, and your response really covered most of it just struck me, maybe given the uncertainty about the feasibility of building up or moving alongside, have we had any architectural advice on that? I mean, I'm confused as to whether it is feasible or not.
Well, that would be something.
Share that kind of confusion.
That would be something that I think would be important to do. I mean, perhaps out of the strategic plan, that will be one of the goals to hire an architect to consult on the feasibility of adding a third floor. Ricardo.
John, I would be really, really curious to hear from your perspective over the 25 years that you've been here doing this wonderful, absolutely stunning work, about your experience with our students, because I know for a fact, of course, teaching them on a daily basis, they are thrilled at the idea of working or having internships at the museum.
Oh.
From your perspective, how is this experience?
Well, we've loved working with students. We've worked with work study students and interns and volunteers really from the get-go. And many of those students are, they're art history majors, they're anthropology majors, they're archaeology majors, classics, just the, cut across the full spectrum of humanities. And many of them have gone on to get advanced degrees and are working in museums across the country today. Sarah Cardwell, who was a young senior when I first came here in 1948, is now in the education department at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Elisa Alexander, who graduated from Willamette in 2010, was an intern, actually curated a small exhibition of Dan May's work in, I think, 2008 at the Hallie Ford Museum of Art, is now the associate curator at the Cantor Art Center at Stanford University. She went on and got her PhD at UC Santa Barbara. So the Hallie Ford Museum of Art is really, for many students, has been a training ground and kind of a life-altering experience for them. They may have come to Willamette not really knowing what they wanted to do. They started studying art history, but then what do you do with a degree in art history? I mean, that's the question that we're all asked, right? Every art historian is asked, what do you do with a degree with art history? But, we've provided them with a viable option. And another one of our students, Kylie Pine, and I think Kylie was an anthropology major. She went on and got her master's degree at the University of Washington in museum studies, and now she's the chief curator at the Willamette Heritage Center. So we have students really across the country working in different capacities, and it's so exciting. And they all come back. I personally don't work with a lot of interns, but Andrea works with interns. Jonathan Bucci, our curator of collections and exhibitions, works with a lot of interns. And with the addition of all of these collections, and our colleague in art history, Ann Nagorski, has really been wonderful. We have a large ancient collection. A couple of years ago, Fred Newman donated his collection of ancient art to the Hallie Ford Museum of Art, a collection of about 250 objects. And Ann and her students have been systematically studying and doing research on these objects. I mean, this is an incredible opportunity for students to be able to actually, hold a 6th century or 7th century bronze Egyptian cat and to be able to study it and research it. That's the exciting part about the relationship between art history and art and classics and archaeology in the museum. To create those kind of opportunities. I never had them as an undergraduate. I wish I did. So, any other questions? Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your attention. Turn the lights on.